This is Brad Hutchings, and you're watching the Break It Down show, but it's a little different today because I have a guest. I'm the host, and I have a guest, Pete A. Turner. You might know him. Pete, do the intro.
Hi, this is Pete A. Turner, and you're watching the Break It Down show. We're doing
Pete
it.
wants
Thanks, man. I appreciate you doing this.
Sure. Pete doesn't like talking to himself. He likes having a host. And today he wants to talk about Marco Rubio's three-point plan for Venezuela, which Marco, or Mr. Secretary Rubio, we're not that familiar with him, which Secretary Rubio spelled out in a recent speech, I think, Pete. And elsewhere he spelled it out too. But anyway, the first part is transition. We need to take them from where they are to where they're going to be. The second part is reconciliation, meaning there's some bad doobies, to use bad hombres. Bad hombres is what Trump would say. There are some bad hombres in Venezuela. They need to be called to account. They need to be dealt with because they were in charge. And the third part is stability. And this is where they have a functioning society. By the way, I'll just make this personal. I had a cousin who came to live with us. He's a little older than me, about 10 years older. He came to live with us in the late 70s. It was like 79. He came to live with us for a couple of months. My dad got him a job at the phone company. And he had, besides being a UCLA graduate and tall as F and able to skyhook a basketball just like Kareem, he had a Venezuelan girlfriend, and he spent a long time with her on the phone. And Venezuela at that time they pretty much just nationalized the oil fields. They were still kind of a capitalist system, still mostly like the gem of South America. This was a place that was a great place to live, and great people, and has become a disaster under, nationalizing things, plus Maduro, plus what was the other guy's name? Chavez. Just absolute disaster. So we need to make them a stable nation again. Okay, Pete, did I do a good job summarizing Marco Rubio?
Yeah, I think you did a good job. And this is not, just as everybody understands, I don't intend to do any kind of political conversation. Or I am often saying political versus policy. We're going to talk the policy side. And I wanted Brad to be able to ask me the obvious questions so that it wasn't just me pontificating about things. I'll pontificate once you ask me the question, but I wanted to have you sort of guide this thing. So I guess, where do you want to start, Brad? How can I help you?
Well, let's start where we have to start right now, is what is transition?
Yeah, the transition's the hardest step because we talk about it the least. There's not really a whole lot of doctrine written on it. I'll give you an example. When a spy leaves an area, we're going to do a transition. And so Brad's coming in, and I'm like, hey, you got to meet Muhammad, and you got to meet Ali, and you got to meet Christopher. These are the guys that are going to help you out. They're great sources. It's very tough to then leave and have Brad hold on to Muhammad, Ali, and Christopher as good sources, because Brad has other motivations. These guys have other motivations. It just isn't easy. And this is a relationships you're trying to exchange. So imagine if you're moving out, and you're going to introduce your best friend to these people that as he moves in, and how, would he be able to maintain your life? No, it would be really hard to do it. And so that challenge of trying to understand what transition is and the deliberate steps to taking it, you don't just leave. That's not transition. That's leaving. And what we tend to do is just surprise and then leave, and then that's it. So we have a program we want them to follow. There's no culture to bind those new steps, those new mechanics. And so transition becomes very tough because it's not a reliable process.
So this is a little bit different than, say, a spy mission in Iraq, or, in Afghanistan, or, whatever else. Venezuela was sort of standing on its own, doing its thing. And we came in and killed 100 people and took no deaths ourselves, and took Maduro with us and his wife. Right. And what we left was basically what was there before, minus 100 Cuban defenders that he liked, minus Maduro. So what's the first stage of transition? What's the first thing that we have to do?
Boy, the first thing is identify when transition starts. it's going to be, there's going to be an exchange, right? That nexus point, when they should be doing more things, and then along the entire way, you're testing the system. For example, when we were in, we'll say Iraq, right? We wanted to make sure that the government functioned, but it wasn't functioning, and we're like, okay, well, that's good enough. Let's move on to the next step. No, 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 no. When you build a crime lab, for example, right, and you can't reliably get cases to come through a crime lab and then turn into convictions and have people on the ground say, holy shit, you have a crime lab? That's a big broken piece of your transition. And this is a very common thing for us. So this has nothing to do with Marco Rubio. It is more about the institution. So State Department doesn't have the on the ground capacity to go, is this working? Are people being connected to their government? And since we're kind of treating this sort of like a counterinsurgency, which even though we were the insurgency, because we toppled at least quasi-legitimate government, because we're in that role, it's on us to get this stuff right. Because we don't get it right, then there's no point in us even trying to do it. We should just leave and let them have been gone.
Well, we are we've most certainly accepted their vice president or their then vice president as interim leader. That would be Delcy Rodriguez.
Right.
As imperfect as that may be, she seems to be, that's a she, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I get the characters confused.
No, it's confusing, and I'm ready to be wrong about that, but I believe you're right about that.
Right. Yes. Anyway, she's very imperfect. She's probably as corrupt as Maduro, or at least as corrupt as Hugo Chavez was. But she's what's there right now, and we can't take, I forget the Nobel Peace Prize winners, we can't take her and put her in that place because, they'd wipe her out in a minute. So this process of even finding a leader is a process that's fraught with peril, and we seem to be doing okay at it because Delcy's playing ball.
Sorry, I was a little distracted there. I'm booking Adrienne Barbeau while we're talking.
Yeah.
So I apologize, but it was like this crisis thing that popped into my thing. Can you go back and ask me that question again?
Let me try that again. Delcy Rodriguez, imperfect interim leader, but she's she is what we are stuck with, right? So
right.
I think everybody who's kind of looking at this from outside would say, well, the rightful leader is, and I don't have her name up, the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, who ran against Maduro the last time around, and people claim that election was very rigged and she would have won it.
Let me just jump in here and talk about this, because the names are kind of irrelevant. What matters is, what are the power structures, right? Who owns those? So even if like Brad gets elected to be mayor, governor, whoever it is, how did Brad get elected? He got elected through a power structure. Now, is it his power structure, or was he assigned in that thing? And so to understand that, so that's at the top, right? But if you go lower and you look at the subordinate, like you think about if someone came in and toppled the United States government and said, hey, Donald Trump has warrants out for his arrest, we're going to bring him in, and our Secretary of State or Ministry of State, or whatever it's going to be, is going to help run, and we're going to have J.D. Vance be the president. And we still have all these mayors, governors, councilmen, all these other people in that stack that we have to figure out what we're going to do with these guys, right? And so this is this very challenging reconciliation step, that there is an existing power structure. It had been influenced by this outside illegal element, when it comes to these gangs and cartels. So now you have to try to wash that out. So who's going to stay in power? So let's say that, I don't know, pick a percentage of how many people cannot stay in their current seat of power. Doesn't matter what the number is, but what's your number going to be?
My number is going to be 100%. It's just like Iran.
Okay. So everybody's got to go, right?
Everybody's got to go.
That's right. So this takes us back to the previous step, stability. The first rule of stability operations is that instability is the norm.
Right.
The second rule of stability operations is that wherever the U.S. goes, we create instability. So when Department of State gets involved, we're a net destabilizer. So now all of a sudden we're back to step one, right? We were at step three a little while ago, transition. Now we're at step one. And so as we gut this entire political system and throw it away, we have to do something with, let's say there's 1,000 people. 1,000 people have to be dealt with because they can no longer be in their seat of power because they're too tied to the gangs and they're not reconcilable now. So for right now, I guess we'll throw them in prison, right? Well, who's going to be the person who has power? Because now the power is scattered everywhere. It's washed out. It's like you've got a barrel full of water and you're trying to pull a grain of salt out of it.
Well, we don't know.
Already dissolved.
Yeah, we don't know who it is. And let's wrap up the transition phase, because on paper the transition looked easy, and it was to go to Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. A's and O's are difficult on the screen, dude. Let me tell you. And she won the Nobel Peace Prize, and she probably rightfully won the last election. There's certainly consensus that it was rigged enough to deny her beating Maduro, right?
Right.
But all that's water under the bridge, because if we installed her and said, okay, you're president, we don't have the way to, like, even to support her security. She'd be gone in a week. And by gone, assassinated and replaced with whatever wants to replace her. There's too much. Yeah. There's too much of an embedded power structure in place. And so what we've had to do is we've had to accept, what's her name? I want to give her a name because this
you're worried too much about the names.
Yeah. We've had to accept Delcy Rodriguez because Delcy Rodriguez is there. And Delcy Rodriguez has not been, let's just say she hasn't been enough of a problem that we've had to launch another operation to do to her what we did to Maduro.
Forget the names.
Exactly.
Forget the names.
So
that's all the names.
Right. That's the transition phase. Let's put a bow on that. That's where we are. Okay.
Well, transition is the last phase, and we aren't even close to where that is because the earlier phases are all messed up, right? So there's power structures that are being vied for now, right? And we're trying to figure out who to back. In this case, we took out 100% of the seated governmental officials, right? And then you have the bureaucrats. The people have office. Bureaucrat, this basically means office power, right? So the people who have power within their office, whatever, the chief of police or whatever it is.
I was saying in the framework you laid out, or that Rubio laid out, the transition is we took Maduro out of power, we replaced him with something else. Now we got to deal with it. Second phase of Rubio's
transition is the last phase.
Oh, okay. The first phase was just doing the operation. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Then reconciliation.
Right.
And then transition.
Right.
Right.
So we're done with that first phase. I thought he said stability. It's all right. It's fine.
Yeah, stability is the first phase, right? He wants to establish stability.
Okay.
And then he wants to do reconciliation, and then he wants to do transition. Right.
I got it backwards. That's fine.
Yeah, and that framework is fine, but it's essentially impossible to do. Right. So because you can already hear the details, how challenging they are. So in this case, again, we take out the entire governmental structure and then whatever bureaucrats that need to go. And now you have to figure out who's got the capacity, but also the backing of the local people. So if you take out the mayor of LA, just for an example, and you put in Bob Stevens, who the fuck is Bob Stevens? How does Bob Stevens stay alive, let alone hold power, right? So we've got to figure these steps out.
I think there's a part you're missing too, is you need to have people who are interested in holding power. Like take your LA example, right? The problem we have now with Karen Bass is Rick Caruso doesn't want to do anything. Like Rick Caruso wants to be a developer. He got his butt kicked the last time he ran. He doesn't want any part of that. And then we got Spencer Pratt, who's a reality TV star. And yet he's probably making the most sense on issues. But do we have anybody who wants to be mayor of LA? Like not just acting it, but they want to do the things that a mayor does, like prepare for fires, actually lead a recovery, do the things that have to be done. The answer is we probably don't. And that may be the answer in Venezuela, is the power structure may be the people who are interested in being in power and everybody else just wants to be left alone. And what do you do then?
Well, yeah, and these are all like the questions, right? So going back to the LA example, yeah. So we decide that Karen Bass and the city council can't be there. Yeah, you have to have people that can sit in those chairs. Those people have to have power, and if
Mhm.
they don't, they get smoked or they get smoked out. One of the two, right? And it can be either way. Either way, each one of those people is an opportunity to create more instability, more doubt, and
Mhm.
then the narrative quickly moves. This is ground truth stuff. Then the narrative moves away from the control of the US. Because here's the thing the State Department hates doing, going out and doing the work that you have to do to understand, like, hey, this guy might be an asshole, but he knows how to do this job and he can rally these 100 people. These
Right.
religious elders, here's the thing the State Department really hates. If you got to go out and gather all of the ministers and bishops and all of the religious leaders in LA to understand the network religiously before you start making these big changes, well, they don't ever do that because it's a separation of church and state. We don't think that way. I've written about this too. We have this general dismissal of church and state and how they work together. So if we're unwilling to do these steps at the ground level, to get out of the embassy and get out and get our feet and hands dirty and be shot at times, then you can't reliably get to stability because stability is hard won. Instability is the norm right now in that country. And to
Right.
pull that band apart and then put the pegs in, that band is still trying to pull those pegs out. So whatever's holding those pegs has to be resolute. And it's not the government because we just
Right.
took the government apart.
Right. And the problem with Venezuela too is that nationalization of the oil fields in the 70s, and then Hugo Chavez when he came to power, um, both of those activities had the backing of the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church is very big in Venezuela. Like you
Sure.
you talk about going to all the ministers and whatever else and getting their support. Now there's one minister there, and unfortunately that is an international power that
Right.
that leans, it definitely leans socialist, and that's the path that got us down this road to where we had to go and extract Maduro.
Can I make stability even more complicated now?
Please, please.
You have a Venezuelan diaspora out around. Probably the
Yes.
biggest one probably is in Florida, right? These folks have done well for themselves in the last 20 years. They have a lot of money and they want to get back in there and they want to help.
Hmm.
They hold a lot of power. They also have connections to things like gas and oil companies, right?
Right.
And so they're going to bring their power and influence, and rightfully so, back to Venezuela so they can help. But some of them are going to be less scrupulous than others. We're
Right.
bad at picking the people that look. Our ill-principled behavior allows for unscrupulous or people who are about to lose their scruples to get into seats of power. So now this person who had the sweet life in the United States, living in Florida, down in Miami, and now they're back. That's Dave. That guy was an asshole 20 years ago. He's an asshole now. Fuck Dave. Dave's like, well, I have money and I'm going to do things. And he's going to be an agent of change. You don't change, you don't control that change. It could be bad, it could be good. I mean, just like any new venture, some percentage of these ideas and these people's hopes and dreams are going to fail. And it's going to, because of instability and because violence is power in this case, some percentage of them 50%, 50% plus are going to fail. And so there's going to be a lot of tumult there. So yes, they have the history of being great, but that's not who they are right now. Right now, they're all trying to vie for enough when there hasn't been enough for a long time.
Yeah, and you can't just have like a few guys like go back. I mean, you need to repatriate a large culture to have a cultural influence, right? You've got to,
Yeah,
like, let's say there are 2 million Venezuelans in Florida.
sure.
You need 1 million of them to go back to Venezuela and live life like they do here, and for that to rub off on a culture that hasn't seen that in 40 years,
Yeah. Now
right?
think about this. Let's say we get 1 million to go back. If 600,000 of them fail, some percentage of that 400,000 that's left are going to figure it out, but it's going to be costly, deadly. People are going
Right,
to get cancer and die at the wrong moment. All kinds of
right,
things are going to happen, right? It's 400,000 people. And
right,
so all of that creates this tumult in the government and in the populace. So the the people are trying to respond to this new leader. Hey, we all want to go in the right direction. But if there's, let's say you're in charge of 100,000 people and you're representing them some way in government, you're going to have 500,000 opinions on what you should be doing, all from these 100,000 people. Right. And so it's hard to gather that group in a way that goes forward. Yes, we want to go forward. Yes, we're going to do the right thing. There's a lot of positivity, but as the work starts to happen and as your block starts to not have electricity, but they all do, all of this creates dissent. And that dissent gathers into these scabby pockets and they fester and they turn into very hard places to govern.
Not to mention with our approximate math, we had 2 million Venezuelans in Florida. We took 1 million, we put them back in Venezuela. Those million who stayed behind aren't going to be too excited about being the next million to go back if the first million fail, right? They're going to like the life they have here. And frankly, the first million that might go back, they might look in the mirror and say, I like the life I have here. It's way better. Mm-hmm. I can still be with the Venezuelan community that I loved because here we are in Florida, but I don't have to go back to that hellhole.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a problem too. And then, so what you got to do then is you got to work with what you have available. Right. It's like, you can't depend on those people coming back. I think, just comparatively, when you look at the Iranian diaspora, there's a whole bunch of them that absolutely will go back. They know they have it good here, but their ties to Iran and to the Iranian culture and even to people that are still in Iran are so strong that they will go back and they'll put in the work. And you can see them talking about it right now. I mean, even uniting around the Shah is something you don't see with the Venezuelan diaspora.
Yeah. The Venezuelan diaspora is very passionate about what happened. Are they very passionate about risking everything to maybe get some version of a better Venezuela to get? That's a hard, that's easy to say yes to, but it's still hard to win. Right. And so this is why the names are sort of irrelevant, because whoever's going to be around in 10 years, there's still going to be a lot of tumult, a lot of anger, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of negative things. This is just how the ground truth works. And when you're focused on the very tippity top, oh, that person's great. They're making deals and all these other things. But if folks aren't making money, if resources aren't being spread around equally, and it doesn't matter if they really are, it matters what the perception is on the ground, then you're going to have problems. So the stability part becomes really challenging to master. And it involves a lot of mistakes and trying to understand what's going on. Let me tell you a thing the State Department likes to do. So we're going to go out and we think Matt Balaker is is a friend of ours, everybody. Matt Balaker, he's a comedian. We need Matt Balaker to be on the city council in District 12 of Province 2. So Matt, first off, doesn't want to do that. Partly because Jose is like, fuck Matt Balaker. If that motherfucker steps his foot back in this center of governance again, I'm going to shoot him. And he ain't joking. He's going to shoot him. Right. And so we're like, but it's Matt Balaker. Matt Balaker is the answer, everybody. Matt Balaker. And then the State Department people rotate out because it's hard work out there. The new people come in like, oh, yeah, Matt Balaker is the answer here. So they're all check their watches. Matt Balaker. Everybody, Matt Balaker. Matt Balaker. And that's all they say. Meanwhile, it's not possible. And so they push and they push and they push. And so Matt Balaker and Jose are forced to work together at times because, one State Department person is more powerful than the next person. And it just causes more of this dissent, right? Because we can't shut up and learn about Venezuela. You have all kinds of wonderful people that know Spanish. You have all kinds of Venezuelans that come back. But if you've lived not in Venezuela for 20 years, the Venezuelans there are going to be like, who the fuck are you? You're not Venezuelan anymore. You're an American. You're a kid. Oh, fuck that kid. So there's a lot of that problem where you have this sea of dissent that you have to deal with. And there's not a reliable way of doing it. You're going to have to break some dishes along the way. And the State Department doesn't have time for dishes. They just don't want to do that, because if they report failure upwards, that ain't going to fly around here.
Yeah, but you know what? I think you get to the real point of this, which is failure actually is an option. And let me not just a possible outcome. It's a possible outcome too, but it actually is an option. And what you got to keep in the back of your mind was, if you believe the story of the threat was unacceptable. And the threat was this: they had Iranian IRGC and Hezbollah training in Venezuela, near our shores, certainly just across the water from us. They were basically money laundering for Iranian oil. That's what all these ghost tankers and unregistered. We have sanctions on Iran for their oil, and yet if Venezuela runs it, well, then there's no sanctions, I guess. You have a sort of a cooperative threat in the region, certainly between Venezuela and Cuba, as evidenced by Cuba was, basically supplied Maduro's security, and it was all Cubans who died for his cause. Right. You have sort of the economic stability of refugees flooding into Colombia. Like Colombia is imagine being a refugee flooding into Colombia. I mean, it's quite the choice.
Yeah.
But certainly you do certainly you have that with the bigger and more well-off states in countries in South America as well, who are not going to do anything constructive about this. So that's that's the thing, is like we're here because we had to be here. And so even if we mess it up from here, that's possible. And we might need to accept that, hey, as bad as we can mess it up from here, it's not as bad as it was.
Well, I mean, potentially, right? Potentially.
Right.
It can definitely, all of a sudden, ISIS, in some form or fashion could sprout up here, or something.
But if ISIS did, we would take them out. I mean, that's the point. Like, we would not tolerate them. We wouldn't tolerate that.
But Brad, it doesn't work like that. It's not linear. It's not if then this, right?
Yeah.
Because we were in Iraq still, and we still allowed ISIS, or unable to stop ISIS, because we were politically unwilling to do it. So whatever this is now, wherever Venezuela is at, let's say they're on step 0, they won't be stable before Donald Trump leaves office. That won't happen.
That's true.
And if it does, it's such a long shot. You can't reliably count on it. And so if he loses midterms, our influence starts to change. Don't know which way it'll go, but it'll change. And then if the Democrats take back the presidency, guess what? It'll change again. And so these changes in policy and budget are vital to creating some kind of stability, if you can repeated and reliably do that. And I'll tell you right now, State Department cannot. They don't have the ground expertise to do it. They're going to have to work with business people. Now, look, Donald Trump is good at that part of it, right? He'll get the right kind of business people in there, but they're going to move towards things that satisfy their own means first. And that's fine. That is a way to approach this problem.
Yeah.
But we don't have the ability. We're going to ride this horse. It's going to go whatever direction it goes in, and we're going to have very little say in what that looks like. So what our version of stability is not going to match. Like, what we breathe is not going to match the outcome. Almost 100% sure about that.
Let me state it a different way, is we've learned that we can't nation build, or the State Department can't nation build. We can't do it in a planned way. It just doesn't work. So maybe we're at sort of an acceptance of that yes, that there are some things the State Department has to do because it's the State Department. Okay. At the same time, we cannot depend on them to come up with a plan to get to a better Venezuela. That's not going to happen from there. We have to try different things. And one of the things, we have to try, and it's fraught with failure, of course, is bring businesses in, bring oil companies in, have them infuse the country with revenue from the oil, and then go from there. I mean, it's a better situation than what we have now. It probably won't be perfect. It will probably have tremendous problems, but that would be better than where we are now. And we need to be able to, take that risk and work with that risk, and, work with private parties to look, if private parties are interested in Venezuela, and then you can get the people of Venezuela interested in the private parties, well, now you've got an environment and a culture where that country can actually survive on its own. Like that, we can't impose
all that right there is harder than all of it is. The if is not a reliable outcome. The people will all of this stuff is challenging for a reason, because
Right.
instability is the norm. So the projected next outcome is hard to achieve because instability is going to reign. This is not a
Right.
stable place. And again, like if you're at the top thinking about what's going to happen at the bottom, it ain't going to work, because the bottom,
Right.
the local folks have to believe in what's going on. You said the word nation building. Let's go back to that.
Yeah,
So
we
that
can't
was
do
the
that.
theory. Well, and maybe we can. I would say that we didn't do a very good job of doing it. Like we didn't treat it serious, like, right? So people would come but have these ideas what we were going to try to do. We didn't do it well. So maybe it's possible that we can nation build, but you actually have to act like that's a serious thing. The next problem is what we should be talking about is state building. So we have a state there. It exists already. And if you can improve elements of the state and the demos accepts the state, okay, great. Maybe that's what you're doing. Again, who's going to do that? Who's going to be the person on the ground? Is it going to be some expat Venezuelan that comes back and advises on business at the local level? Who knows, right? And again, always violence is political. And so if Brad comes down with this fancy Spanish words like, I'm going to invest in this area, and someone's like, not today, you're not, and they shoot you in the fucking face, all of a sudden it's like, what happened to Brad? Oh man, now this area is not permissive. Well, that changes everything. Now you have to have more security when the next Brad comes down. I don't want Brad to get shot in the face. No one does. State Department doesn't want to go outside when it's that dangerous. And so it only takes a little bit of danger and a little bit of dissent to get the United States to turtle shell up and go, whoa, it's dangerous out there. And now everything becomes a crime and a threat, when really it's political.
Well,
So-
even sending oil business down there, they're not oil businesses; they're security businesses.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You know,
Right.
I mean, that's right, because the thing about oil is, like, as opposed to lots of other goods and services you might want to produce, is it can ignite and it can go
Right.
boom. You know,
Right.
and so you've got you have a bigger security problem than you have an extraction problem, for sure, or a transportation problem.
And that security problem feeds into the cultural problem, because
Right.
now you're going to have these safety zones and only certain people are allowed in there, right? And we're hyper afraid of anybody sneaking in. And so we limit, even though we're desperate for this cultural movement and a lot of people to happen, we're going to limit access, and there's going to be a lot of money with that access. And so that's going to create, so all of these things create this tumult. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's way more complex to establish what stability and security looks like. And so when we say, oh, it's going to be the security, then it's all going to be good. And then the businesses are going to come in, and all of that can happen and have it all go south and make it a worse place than it is now. I mean, that it's a reliable outcome that it will not be anything. I mean, it is hard for us to come in and build a state or improve a state to the point where it can stand up. And by the way, who wants us there? Who doesn't? A lot of people are going to disagree on that. Just again, our presence creates instability.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's reliable to say that the Venezuelan people did not want what was there.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that anybody who comes along is what they want there. It's just
right.
We didn't want this guy. I mean, like, they didn't even fight that hard for him, really. I mean, they didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't fight back. That's something they didn't do.
Hey, the Iraqis were stoked when we showed up too. They were stoked because they didn't have Saddam around. And then as we were leaving, they're like, it was better under Saddam. Right. This is a reliable, that is a very likely outcome here.
Like, Saddam nostalgia. I think one other problem is, you know, like in business, or certainly in, technology business, in order to get a big success, we often fail 9 times. And you say, well, why can't we get these big successes without failing? Well, because you can't, because you have to learn from the failures. The problem applied in, you know, kind of remaking a society, or even just limiting it to remaking a government, you know, state building versus nation building, it is messy, and we're probably going to fail at 9 out of 10 things we do if we eventually succeed.
Right.
And then along the way, people are going to look at those failures and they're going to say, well, you're failing.
Right.
Let's stop this. Let's stop this experiment. It's not worth doing. And that's that's like this big meta cultural problem that we have, is not knowing what the role of failure is, and not being able to accept, hey, we're trying this out. We'll try the next thing out. We have a limit on this. We'll try the next thing out when we're when we're doing it. We don't have leadership that does that. We have leadership that's bold and
Yeah.
says we're going to do it this way. And as you're saying, it's missing too.
Yeah, well, I would say this is one of the key things in that transition document. To get to transition, you have to start way in advance, like on the tiny part of the sled as it goes up, right?
Right.
And you have to avoid linear thinking. So every time someone's like this and then this, like when you said, if we do this, that tells me, oh, an if. Well,
yeah,
that's a test point. And
yeah.
if we got to that point, what should have happened before? Well, we should have, this many elders and they should be going in this direction. And okay, so now maybe we go on to the next, maybe we have to go back. Maybe we had to go back and retard a little bit and go back and grab what we needed that we didn't get. We have a crime lab, but hey, nobody trusts it. Oh, fuck. What do we do to make that happen? Right. So like you have the crime lab. Hey, aces, it's there. But 0 people have ever gone to jail from it. We in Afghanistan, we had a program for the Taliban to come in from the cold, get some money, start a farm, be good people. You could work the entire year there that you were there, bring 0 Taliban in. As long as you had that program, you're winning, right? And there's no winning in that. So all of those things go into this. Let me make it a little bit worse. When we pick the things that are important, because we haven't taken the time to meet the elders or talk to the dads or the uncles or the women that make decisions, we will decide for them what the plan is going to be, and we hold desperate that plan. Like we do, it is the plan. So we're like, hey, well, it's women issues that matter here first. Hey, women issues are great. And here's how women's issues worked in Afghanistan. I learned a lot about this. The governor said, oh, female education is my #1 priority. Oh, well, I would love to hear that. Let me write that down in my book, right? He's like, but first, you have to have security. And I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. He's like, but it's not as simple as that. First. So now we have something, we're in the 0th zone now, right? And so you have to be able to, so Brad has to be able to go, I'm going to leave my little household and I'd be able to go safely to where I do business and come back. If I can't do that, then the women don't get educated. Oh, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. So the first priority is that Brad can go to and from work without being accosted. That sounds like a lot of work because, how do you guarantee that, right? And granted, Afghanistan's really hard to do this in. Venezuela won't be as hard, but it's still not easy because highwaymen and people that want to shoot you and whatever, you have something they want, all these problems come into that mix.
Then, we don't have to airlift everything in. I mean, that's probably the biggest the biggest help.
Right. Yeah, no. The next part of security is when Brad's gone, Brad needs to know his compound's going to be cool. Right. And that no one's going to come in and try to rape his women or steal his shit, right? Because Brad's not there to protect the house. Right. Fuck, that's hard too. Because Brad, his uncles, they don't trust the police because the police are all stoned, or whatever, right? And so are the police trusted enough that they could, handle any kind of issues or problems? Okay, let's say that's good. All right. Can my kids go to school and come back? Yes. Okay, now we can you ready? Now we're ready to educate the boys.
Well, see, I think one of the things
I finish this thing. I gotta finish this.
Yeah.
The next priority is educate the boys, because if they don't, no one's going to run this country. They're the people that go and do things. So before you educate the girls, you have to get better at educating the boys so that they're smart enough to do the things these families need done. And now you can finally get to the girls.
So Pete, I think, it's funny because you told me if I said if, then we've got linear thinking. And I think what you've done is it's not really linear thinking. It's sort of this dependency thinking. Let's extract that a little bit. It's like instead of, we don't have to go like one linear path. There's a lot of paths. Okay, I'm going to one up you. And I'm going to say that's just as unproductive as linear thinking. And the thinking we should replace it with is make it a little better today. That should be our algorithm. Make the situation a little better today. Not thinking of the future, not thinking of all this other stuff. It's just, what do we have today? What can we improve? And then tomorrow will be hopefully in a better state. What do you think of that?
I think that's good. And you're in the zone. Like we liken it to an arrow and a cloud. right? And
Okay.
so we tend to have, here's the inexorable linear thinking, operation 1, 2, 3, 4,
Right.
5, 6, all the way up until victory.
Right.
You know,
It has one weak point and that's blown up.
well, yeah, this
Yeah.
this was celebratory, not not
Yeah.
political.
I got you. Right.
But so when you're on this path, right, it's like inexorable, right? That's
Right.
the linear thinking, because the military unit's like, we will then take on mission 14, which will
Right.
be inoculate the goats. And look, that's all wonderful, but it doesn't lead to anywhere. So this path that you're talking, it is not a path of least resistance. It's a critical path.
Right.
And that path is winding. You got to go backwards. You got to be like, oh fuck, that stone I was going to step on to get across the water dry, they don't exist anymore. It disappeared.
Right.
So I gotta put either, I gotta figure that out. Am I gonna put a table there? Am I gonna put some concrete into the water? Whatever it is. So that pathway is fraught with errors. It's fraught with mistakes, and we don't like that.
And the destination you've chosen might not be right.
Well, that's absolutely, and it might change
It might change, right? In which case your path has to change. Okay, so go on to the multi-path. I think that's where you're headed.
Well, what I was going to say is yeah, as you're on this path, it will change. It will evolve. You will get better at it. You will realize who the partners are that you need there, but it takes more than a year to do that. It takes more than 5 years to do that, so that you can reliably say, we got the milk plant running and everybody here in town believes that it's running.
Right.
and people have jobs, right? So as the money comes in, look, money's going to come in and that's going to help. But Iraq is hugely wealthy. And they're pissed off because of all the Iranian influence. You've seen me do shows on that, right?
Yes.
All of this stuff. As soon as you think, well, they have the money, then they'll be, and then it might be that this next young, smart, brilliant kid's like, I'm going to get my job and I'm going to get the fuck out of here because it's going to be crazy for the next 20 years. I'm going to take this ride to Stanford, and there's still going to be this brain drain, and people that have means to leave are still going to leave because it's still going to be chaotic. It's hard to get this stuff right, is what I'm saying over and over again. So you're right. That path needs to be whatever that path is. And your path is going to be different than my path. And if I get too far out in front, if I don't, and you said this earlier, this is a really smart thing. If I don't allow the Venezuelans to be where they're at and figure out how I get them to be slightly better than where they're at. And the Venezuelan way is the better way. And it's not going to be, I'm not allowed to be comfortable in any of this. I have to feel like we're on the edge of failure all the time because you are.
Even better, Pete. It's not just the better way; it's the cheaper way too. Like,
oh, for sure. Yeah.
We you start adding up the bills, and I don't know how many trillions of dollars it was for Iraq and Afghanistan, but it was as many trillions of dollars as it was. It was that many trillions of dollars too much.
Yeah.
Right. It's
but
it gets ridiculous. We didn't really have our overall goal there was, well, we're going to replace it with a democracy or this or that, and call it nation building. We decry that now and everything, but that became what set the paths. And maybe we didn't need to set the paths. Maybe we just needed to say, okay, look, we don't need terrorists there flying planes into our buildings. And then whatever is better than that is better than that. As I do my Will Riley, voice. Whatever's better than that is better than that.
Maybe.
There's
always that, right? Yeah, that's what you're hoping for. So when you start to see the hallmarks of stability, when you have someone on, let's say you hire Pete to go on the ground, like help us understand here's a question that we have to ask ourselves all the time before the State Department. We know that we have our sticks up our asses and we're more worried about salsa night at the embassy than we are on what's going into the villages, because that shit's hard and scary. So if you don't have enough Pete's out there, right. And that's not enough. Look, the things they do are incredible, but they're not great at all of it. Here's one of the main problems. This is just like an essential thing, right? When State Department people show up, they're always the smartest person in the room. That's how they live. And so when you see them in the wild, here's what Pete is experiencing. I look at him like, oh, State Department, I got my eye on them now. Because I know they're not the smartest person in the room. I know that they're the most obtuse, obstinate, all the obs, ob. Put all the roots behind ob, and that's who State Department is. And that's why they're net destabilizers, because they cannot simply slow down and listen to understand where the work is. All this stuff comes from my work and seeing that. Like, where is the work at today? It is not in building the battered women's shelter. It's not. These folks have other problems. Like, for example, electricity. Jesus Christ. Can we get every house in Venezuela? It's a country packed with oil. If we
Right.
can't
Can we get them electrified? Can we get them sewer? Can we get
Yeah.
them water? There's got to be a company in the US that could do that on a small scale repeatedly. And then
Right.
you could just tell them, here are 2 cities you need to do this for. Go do this. We'll give you the space to do it. Go do it. We'll pay for it, and then we'll step back and evaluate.
Think about this. Think about this. Okay, so you're going to build a stadium in Las Vegas, and you start doing it, and you're like, here's where our marks are going to be. We're going to be going vertical by this date, doing this. People are not going to believe you the entire time, even as you're building the motherfucker, right? So the same principle applies. Like, we're going to start and we're going to electrify this whole place, and electricity is going to be on 95% of the time for everybody. And we're going to slowly ratchet that up as we build capacity, right? If you can accomplish that, you've got your first big step. That's a big national goal. That's how you turn a state on. That's how you turn a nation on. If you can't get to that point, because here, let me pull up my great image here of this. If you can't pull that up because everything's a mess, then you end up with this kind of bullshit.
Right. I was just thinking of that picture. Yeah. And but the thing is, Pete, we don't have to solve that problem for the whole country all at once. Like, if we can just say, look, we're going to go solve this thing piece by piece for some places. We don't have any real goals. Let's just do 10 of them. Let's just see if we can make it better. Now, people start to see that and they say, hey, you know what? These guys are kind of good at this. Maybe we should have them do more. We don't have to have the goal of electrifying everybody in Venezuela, because we will screw up that goal. Let me give you an example from technology where we're screwing up the goal right now. And I don't even agree with the goal. And the goal is that we'll have enough AI infrastructure in order to everybody can do all the AI they need up in the cloud. Okay. About that. But that we've stated that that's a goal. Guess what's happened is localities, states, even markets themselves have pushed back and said, no, you're not doing that. And whether it's New York, which just passed a 3-year moratorium, Governor Hochul just passed a 3-year moratorium on data centers in the state, right? Like, well, there, you can't build in New York now to do your plan, because they said, oh, this is what you're doing. We're going to come out with an opposite against it. The market feature that's going to kill data centers as this giant build out plan is the price of memory right now.
You were saying that, yeah.
Even though they have it sold for 2 years, the contracts all include like ability to increase price for the vendors, because they see there's demand. They're not planning their use of it very well. Well, we'll just suck more money out of them, and that could kill the data centers just as easily as Governor Hochul did. If the tech industry had just been if they'd just been chill and they just said, okay, this year we're going to do a few data centers where we can, and it doesn't really matter where we want to do them. Just being able to place a few will help our situation out better with rolling out this AI stuff. They probably would have gotten away with it under the radar. Instead, what they've done by setting out a plan and a goal is they've given rise to all sorts of opposition, which will be right in the way of their plan and their goal, and they'll never achieve any of it.
Yeah. I mean, you get that, like, these barriers that come up that you hadn't anticipated. Like here in California, we've had a lot of fires, and so construction material costs are high.
Yeah,
and that gets blamed on a lot of people, to include Donald Trump, who didn't set a single fire in this state. So I'm not absolving Donald Trump, but I'm saying that's that's ground truth, right?
Yeah.
And so all these people are going to blame Donald Trump because sheetrock costs more, but sheetrock has cost more for years now because there hasn't been enough of it, and until the capacity can come up to match it. Well, guess what? So these things cause trouble. So when you do electrify the grid, that's great, right? But the entire time you need Pete's to go out and say, how you like that electricity? And we're like, fuck you.
But you know what? You need Pete's to go. Right. You need Pete's to go out locally and say, how do you like that electricity?
Right.
And you need to have little projects that won't garner opposition, that make things better. And you need to be willing, when they start to get noticed and they start to get, everybody comes in to extract their rent from the project or whatever else, you need to be willing to back up and say, okay, this needs to settle down a bit. Let's focus on something else. If you come into Venezuela with a plan that it's going to be the 51st state of of the United States. And it's going to have 2 baseball teams, one which might come from Florida and another which might be an expansion team. 2 MLB teams because, hey, we get all our talent from Venezuela, right? Why not let them play locally?
Sure.
You do this immediately. You've set up a whole bunch of things for people to oppose. Whereas if you just say, we're going to make this a little better today, or this month we're going to make this a little better. Well, then there's, then you sort of have the room to operate to make it a little better and be judged on it. I really wanted to bring this in earlier, but let me bring this into the mix now. We're essentially repeating history here. This is what we did with Manuel Noriega, and we didn't have a plan to transform Panamanian society. They kind of did it on their own. Of course, they had, they got the canal, and so that's always something that they can leverage for, to bring some money in and stuff like that. The fact is that as of late, maybe they've brought in the Chinese and Chinese money a little bit too much to our comfort level. But where we are today with Panama is we're still way better off than we were when Noriega was in charge. And maybe we have to accept we didn't really have a plan for that, but it did sort of go our way long term. Maybe we have to accept, that's how Venezuela is going to be. Now, that doesn't mean we neglect them. That doesn't mean we don't try to make things better for them. We sort of owe them for that. We owe them that for coming in and toppling the stability they thought they had. But it doesn't mean we have to have a giant plan for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need a general sense, right? And you need to be comfortable with a lot of failure. You need to listen. And this article that I posted down below, it's got transition operations, but really a lot of this is kind of this coin idea on how to do things. And there's a thing called the cultural decision-making process. And how do Venezuelans in this village, in that village, in this city, whatever it is, how do they make decisions? So like we would make these grand decisions for the Afghans, and I'd look around like, there's no buy-in here. And so I knew, I didn't need the commander to tell me. I knew, like, I'm going to go find out and see. And I'd be like, tell me what you think about that meeting. And then they would laugh. He laughed in my face, and I write that down. This is part of that whole struggle. So that cultural decision-making process, how do they make decisions? What are their goals? And how do they think they're going to accomplish it? And can you get inside of that stream? And if that stream is not for you, stay out of it and take the win and let them do it. And ask them, hey, when can I come back and check on this? Yeah, come back in 2 weeks. It'll be done. And then you go out and test that. So you need to constantly test, constantly assess where you're at, and then figure out the next very easily accomplishable thing. And so that when Pete calls up to Rubio and says, hey, man, Village 15 doesn't have electricity. No, it does. It's here on the map. Well, I'm just telling you. I'm telling you right now, they don't have electricity. Whether they do or not doesn't matter. If these guys are pissed about the quality or whatever it is, that has to be dealt with. And that maybe that isn't our job. Probably isn't. It's probably the Venezuelans, but we have to get them, transition them to that point. So part of that transition ramp, it goes up higher and higher and higher until we do less and less and less. But we're still always doing things on that. There's still a sine wave on that whole pathway. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Pete, you didn't, I don't think you quite mentioned this. This is an article that you co-authored, was the one that you linked. And it's a very interesting article. And I would tell you how I read it, sort of as a business person, is I read it as market research, as on the ground market research. That now you're a little bit more into the process than the actual research of a particular on the ground. But that's important too, because we need to know what questions to ask. We need to know, what are we evaluating here? What are we generally trying to do? Even if we don't have a plan that we're going to stick to, or, I would almost prefer we don't have a plan, just so the stick-to-ness doesn't get in there. But that's a small aside. The point is, what questions do we ask in order to evaluate what we're doing? And that's there needs to be a framework for that. And we need to know, hey, are we, if we think we're doing good, are we doing good? If we're putting in a women's studies department in a university in Afghanistan, there's got to be something that tells us this is not what we need to do. And that we don't have the common sense to say this is not what we need to do institutionally. This is why we fail. It's because there are too many of these things that we either don't need to do, they're not helpful, or they're actually like hurtful in context, and we do them anyway.
Here's a set. This is from that paper. It's point number 13, right? And it's called Their Plan. Capitalize on your partner's plans and political savvy. Allow them to lead. You know who hates that? The State Department. They hate that shit. And so this is when we're our own worst enemy. And all of the things you say, it's a matrix. It's a cube of matrix things. So each matrix is joined into a bigger matrix. Right. And so if I can't get on the phone and call whoever I need to call, right? So I'm your Pete on the ground. Hey, Brad, a simple problem, bigger than me. Here's what we need help with. By the way, all inspired by the Venezuelans. This is the local governor's plan, and people seem to like him. How do we fix this? Don't be like USAID and be like, yeah, we'll do it. And then that's it. You just get stuck. It never happens. And then you call back. You're like, hey, what happened to that thing we were going to do? Oh, we canceled that program. We canceled it. We're not doing that anymore.
One of our favorite.
People's lives are betting on that.
Right. One of our favorite people, Robert Cialdini, a recent for you, kind of an adult lifelong for me. He would talk about, in influence is that it's not telling people what to do. It's the first step is getting people to tell you what they're going to do. And then it matches what you want to do. Right. Like as you say in step 13, let them lead. Well, then the next step beyond that, which Cialdini doesn't go into much, but if you sort of think about this, create an environment where you don't have to influence them. Right. Sure. Where their wants and needs really do align with what you think should be done. Then you've done your work there. And if you get on the ground and you see, hey, there is no way these people are going to come to the conclusion that the Afghani university needs a women's studies department, right? Then you just got to say, hey, this just isn't this isn't a goal. This isn't anything that we want to have anything to do with.
Then you got to endure the lady with the crazy shaking.
Yeah, right, exactly, because she knows.
Let me show you a slide. You've seen this before, but not everybody else has. So this is the district governor's plan where I was working, and I took his plan and I did this thing in a very savvy way. Spy stuff goes on, and we talk about all the different things he's interested in, and then the colors all mean something, and what our involvement is. You can't see all the things on the slide, but the whole point is what I was deliberate about this. What was his plan? What does he want to do? What pace? How does he measure it out so he can speak our language to us? And get behind that. What we love to do is brief something. Hey, we're going to build a state-of-the-art women's center. It's going to be right here in Caracas. And oh my God, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Right. That's not leadership.
Right. It briefs well, right? Oh my gosh, every single special needs kid is going to get, this plushy thing, and it's going to have a robot beep. You're wonderful. Hug me. And it's like, well, who doesn't love that? I love that. Right. That's great.
Well, Pete, I love the one you used to do all the time, which was the briefing for the bus stop marketplace.
Oh my God. I've got pictures for that stuff too.
Right. Of course that. So Pete won't find the picture faster than I can describe it. But imagine a bus stop, on your local street. It's got like this little architecture with a roof. It's open air, and it's got a bench or a table underneath it. And U.S. military, USAID, or somebody built a bunch of these. Was it for Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Yeah. And nobody went to use the bus stop because there weren't any buses. I mean, I think that's the best way to summarize it. They didn't use it as a marketplace either because there wasn't a market there.
It's so frustrating. And I'm glad you brought that up, because the idea behind the collection center was that we were going to help farmers, right? We were going to help farmers. Did we ask the farmers what they needed help with? No, fuck no. I mean, Pete did. And so I'd be like, hey, so here's what we would do. We would go to Brad, the governor, and say, here's the thing. We're going to build this thing.
Yes, I described it perfectly, except it wasn't totally open or it has a back.
But that's not a bus stop. What that's supposed to be, right, is a place where you bring your goods, like a farmer's market.
Right.
Because this is all USAID hippy dippy stuff, right? And God bless.
But it looks like a bus stop, Pete.
Well, I'm going to get that.
That was my point.
And so the farmer would bring their shit in there and be like, here are all my pomegranates and pumpkins.
Right.
And then the person would be like, these are really high quality pumpkins. I'm going to pay you more than I normally would because you have like all that. That was like their fantasy. This is a fantasy, right?
Yes.
So Pete goes out and talks to the farmers. When you guys bring in your crop, what do? Oh, you know what? My buddy Dave comes down every year. Sometimes he buys the whole thing. Kind of depends on the year in the market. Kind of depends on if I have enough or not. Do you ever take it to them? Oh, sure. Sometimes I take stuff in, like I want to do something else. Yeah. But mostly Dave comes to me, and then he comes all throughout the valley and he buys as much as he needs. So I go to the people that want to build all these fucking things. And I'm like, hey, they got a guy named, and his name's not really Dave, but they have a whole market chain already figured out. This thing, it ain't in it. But wait, it gets worse. So you're the governor, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to build this thing behind your house. And you're like, what thing are you talking about behind my house? What are you talking about? Oh, it's going to look like this. It's going to be great. Farmers are going to come. They're going to bring their shit in there. By the way, Brad talks to farmers every fucking day, and he already knows how all this stuff works. He's like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Like, you're an insane person. You're telling them what you're going to do. So I would always raise my hand to the Americans. Did you ask anybody about this? No. We're just going to build it. They're going to love it. It's awesome. Like, you talked to the governor about it? No. Oh, I did. He didn't want it. What? Yeah. Matter of fact, he doesn't want you there in his district anymore. He's pissed off that you're not listening to him.
Right.
No, he's not. Like, and I turn to the boss and I'm like, hey, man, listen, do what you guys want to do. And then the boss looks at that guy and be like, you just shut up. And so here's what happens. They're like, okay, you got this thing here, right? It's by the side of the road, taxi cab stand, bus stop. And that's what it becomes because it has no function. Because we didn't even know the goddamn market chain, right?
Yeah, I was joking about that, by the way, but that is a detail.
No, but that's really what happens.
Yeah, I know.
It's shade in a place with a lot of sunshine. So yeah, we'll stand under it. But no farmer ever brought their stuff there, and then we would assume incorrectly that the farmers didn't know what it was for. Well, and I would explain to people. Well, here's what this thing is for. They're like, yeah, listen, we know what it's for. We've heard 100 times. There's been 10 of you. We understand that. And I'm like, so you're telling me you know what that thing is for, but you're not going to use it? Yeah, I'm not going to use it. For first, they go like, yeah, I'm never going to use that thing. That's not how we sell our stuff, right? That's how I get to the information. So this is an example of Afghanistan. The same thing happened in Iraq. The same thing will happen because the same people work in the system. So that's why it's not about the names in Venezuela. Right. We don't give a fuck about them. Here's what happens when the ambassador shows up. Here's what happens when Marco Rubio shows up. Oh, here comes the ambassador. Oh, here comes the station, the chief, the chief of the station. We got to make sure we get everything right. We got to do what he says. But the governor wants your full attention on this project that you said you were committed to. No. We'll tell him what to do later. Right. And so we'll push aside the local leader in an instant if our boss is coming. Right.
Yeah. Do you know how many of these were built in any of these particular areas?
Too many. They were common, and they briefed them, and we gobbled it up. We gobbled that shit up like it was the best thing ever. And I don't know of a single farmer that ever used one ever. And I looked around. I looked in other districts and provinces, tried to find, and I found all kinds of Americans that believed in them, but none of them had an actual picture of an actual farmer that wasn't staged. An actual picture of an actual farmer with their actual shit in there.
What do you think a budget was for this? Do you think it was hundreds of thousands, millions? Do you think billions, maybe?
Easy.
Billions, maybe, or at least tens of millions?
I don't know. Who knows how much graft was in that? I mean, obviously a ton, right? Look, it's hard to get people to go to Afghanistan. You got to pay them a fair.
Oh, yeah. There's going to be graft, right? Of course.
Yeah. So, well, and I'm that's legitimate. Like, you're going to have to pay a person $250,000 to go there for a year to go work. So that's not going to ever be cheap. And their job is going to be get those things built. So they're going to push hard on that rock, and they'll be like, hey, boss man, I got to get out there and do this thing. And the boss can be like, I'm not going to fuck with that. Right. Meanwhile, they're losing the entire time. So this is the challenge of all of these things. So when we say, it's got to be stability is one of the hardest. How many countries are stable in the world?
I don't know, 20, 30. You got me.
Yeah. I mean, 10%, that'd be 10%. That'd be 15%, maybe, right?
Maybe 50.
If we'll say there's 200 countries.
Yeah.
That, where we would think there's, so It's like when we say nature abhors a vacuum. No. Vacuums are natural. We're the
Just
exception here.
right. Go look at outer space. Exactly.
Yeah. Go just a few miles up and
go a
see
few
how
miles
you do
up. Tell me how you do with that vacuum.
Right.
Pete. So what? It's not that I hate that program. Like, I mean, it's easy to point back at it and say this is something we should hate because it was such a disaster, and it's something that when I host your show, I can always refer back to when I have nothing else to talk about, right? Because it's interesting. No, I kid. That's a great example. I would like a system where some guy at the State Department could say, we need to build these market stamps, and he would be allowed to experiment with it, even despite criticisms on the people saying no on the ground. There would be a mechanism that allows him to experiment. There would also be a mechanism for feedback collection, which would collect honest feedback and say, hey, we did stage 1 of this. Should we do stage 2? And to say no and accept failure, because that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to try a bunch of things that we think might work and aren't going to work in order to jumpstart Venezuela. That's what we're going to have to do.
I agree with that statement. And however you mechanicize it, your capacity to do the job and approach is going to be different than mine.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be chaos in the data. What we can't do, and I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. So this is what happens. And this is less about them. It's more about us, right? So yeah, Afghanistan is not Venezuela, which is not Iraq. I get all that, but we're the problem, right? So remember, we caused the instability. So we'll put Brad in the chair again. So Pete is on the ground, firefight happens, and the Afghan police say, hey, that was a fun firefight. I go to talk to the police chief. And I'm like, hey, what do? You guys shot up probably 1,000 rounds of ammo and a couple of RPG rounds. You need to get new ones. Like, yeah, it's no big deal. I'll put in a request and it'll be here. And I'm like, oh, that's great. What a chance for me to study to see how the government operates.
Right.
And so I follow the request. It goes up and then nothing comes down. I'm tracking this thing. But you got to let these things take time, right? And so about I don't want to say a month, but we'll say a month later, I track it. And I get to the spot where Brad's sitting. Brad's an American. And I say, hey, you killed this request for ammo and RPGs, but it was the Afghan government. Yeah, well, I'm the partner for the guy at this level here. That guy's tied to the Taliban, so we're not doing that. What? Excuse me? You're not in the Afghan government. And I said, you're not in the Afghan government. Why'd you kill it? Well, that guy's tied to the Taliban. But Mullah Omar lives a mile from here. He's like the king of the Taliban. And it's true. He lived a mile from us. And so I'm like, do you understand that everybody here is tied to the Taliban in some way? Like, and if that's the measure, how is the government supposed to operate? Not my problem.
Right. You have somebody operating as a bureaucrat, not a participant. That's a big problem. That's a huge problem.
And listen,
we need players. That's what we need. We need players.
So anytime you hear the word "crat," everybody, that root is power, right? So bureaucrat, Democrat, that crat is power. A Democrat means in this case the people's power. That's what that means. The power comes from the office. So this person, Brad, is sitting in his office and he has the power to say yes, no to things, even though he's not in power, right? He curtailed it and stopped it. And so now I got to go back to the police chief and say, what are you going to do? And he's like, oh, well, then I'll just do this other thing that is not a governmental action. He'll fix it, or they'll just deal with it. But he has no voice with that American at all. And so he has to find some other system. So then we get mad because we corrupted their system when that person does something corrupt to get the rounds that they need. And now they're a lower grade, or he buys it from his friend on the Taliban, whatever, right? And so now we just paid the Taliban. And so you see what happens, how quickly this thing cascades into chaos, because the black market and the gray market open up. When we talk about the shadow government, you'll hear this term. You'll probably hear it about Venezuela. When you hear the word shadow government, here's the first thing I want you to think. The shadow government is the government. Whether it acts as it because the government isn't doing its job because the state is weak and we haven't state built, or the state is fledgling, and so the governor, whoever it is like, I'm going to go sell a bunch of gas so that I can go buy ammo for these guys.
He's got to do what he's got to do.
Right. Yeah. And so either two cases, either the gray market and the gray government are the government because they have the power, or the existing structure doesn't work properly, it's inefficient, and so they have to then gray market or gray power things back. I hope that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And in fact, even though we think of it as just, oh, that's bad, that's a bad situation.
Right.
It should be nice to have a lot of gray government involved in the rebuilding of Palisades and Altadena and Malibu.
Sure.
That would be wonderful if everything wasn't halted by policy. Like if there were ways around, okay, we know the policy. Why don't you go build it and we'll get your permit later? Why don't you go clear that yard and we'll find a place to stick the debris later, even if it means that we have to go and stick it in a dump that nobody wants us to stick it in.
Hey, listen, that's it right there. I mean, that's all of it, right? And then sometimes you just have to get the job done. Like, this is production over perfection personified into or not personified, but pointing out a region and saying we need to get production going, and you can't have this utopic approach to things, because first off, utopia wasn't a real place and it was a satire. So don't live out the satire and prove more right again for the 8 millionth time, right? So
we need more observers, people who are willing to observe and to not, to observe honestly. We need more of that. We need less people directing things.
Yeah. That's what you need right there, right? You got Pete in a barbershop, right?
Yeah.
And when Pete writes his report and Brad's sitting up there at the State Department, he should have a good relationship with Pete. He should crave that. Hey, I can't get enough ground truth, right? State Department never says that, Brad, right? So when I hear, and I'm not anti Marco Rubio, whatever, I'm hard on the State Department because they got a hard job and they fuck up a lot. Like I've had USAID people say, well, it's really hard there. Like, yeah, guess what? Dig deeper. We're out here getting shot at. And you're sitting here in this office saying it's hard and failing me, getting people killed. Yeah, we get that it's hard.
We get a lot of, we have a lot of command and control going on when we don't know what we're commanding and controlling, and we don't know what the effects of it are. We don't have a lot of listening going on. And, sending somebody to like Pete in the field and just say, just listen, come back with what you come back with. And I'm going to find a way to be delighted with whatever you come back with. Because even if it's not what I wanted to hear or hope to hear, it's going to save my ass knowing it and not, not committing to a direction where I'm going to get my ass kicked.
And understand that Pete is not infallible. That Pete is going to make a lot of mistakes. I'm also going to need to be lasered in by somebody who's like, Pete, you're way over here. You got to
we need you a little over here. Right.
Right. And this is that liminal space stuff that I've talked about. Like I have to enter their world and I have to enter Brad's world. And I have to be able to translate these two things between these people. And it's not comfortable work. It's uncomfortable.
But I definitely
exist in these two different worlds.
I definitely need you more focused on reporting what's actually there than storytelling. Like come up with a narrative and make it fit what's there fit into the narrative or squeeze in or something. I don't need you doing that. I need to know what's going on. And then I need to try an experiment, and I need you to measure, hey, I'm trying this experiment. What's going on? I don't expect it. I don't even expect it to succeed. If it succeeds, that's a bonus. And then for you to say, yeah, well, guess what? The past 9 failed, but this one succeeded. Maybe we do it a little bit more. And I think that's how you end up making a difference, over the long haul.
Yeah, the approach has to be different. It can't be where Pete mocks you and says, "Well, the brief's well." Because if I walk out of that briefing thinking that it briefs well, you've got a real problem. Because I already know where you're going to fuck up because I've seen it. And again, this is why I say the names don't really matter. The names are sort of secondary. And I'm in Ben's studio on accident. And Ben just popped in. Hey, Ben, I'll be out of here in a second. Anyhow, I'll wrap this up, man. But I appreciate you talking with me and doing that. Is there anything you want to say in closing before we wrap? I hope you all get, like, I'm not down on any administration, but I'm hard on the State Department because we have these tasks for them and they suck at coming through.
So let me relate it to my AI stuff, because one of the things I get a lot of criticism for in my AI writings, my AI approach, is I want to know how this is going to work at ground level. If you tell me you're going to do something, I want to attach it to the algorithms we're going to work with. And if it doesn't attach, I know it's not going to do well. And I will tell you it's not going to do well. And for that, Brad's such a negative Nelly. Brad just doesn't believe in anything. Brad, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
My point is not to say what a terrible life I have in the terrible business I'm in. That's not the point. The point is that this is kind of how we work with things. Like people who are customers, people who are paying for stuff, people who are leaders expect that they know what's going on and it can be implemented faithfully by the people on the ground who have to implement it. And that doesn't work well. It doesn't work well in business. It doesn't work well in government.
Yeah. I think that says everything. Hey, everybody. Thank you all so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Pete. Talk soon.
Yeah, thank you.